Lovelies, before we get into everything properly, here are the stats of all the books that I read in April. Hey all, today I'm going to be sharing all the books that I read in April. It's definitely not as much as I read in March, as like 20 plus. I've got 8 to share with you today, but I don't know, I think I might have burnt myself out a little bit. I wasn't like in a slumpy mood or anything like that. I just found myself getting less through them. But to be fair, I also started a big book. I'm currently in the middle of, I think pretty much smack bang in the middle of Black Leopard, Red Wolf, and I was focusing a lot on that. I've been doing a reading vlog and stuff as well, and so that just took up quite a lot of time. I'm not finished, as I say, I'm halfway through, but I thought I should probably start reading other books as well. I'm also currently reading Walhalla by Nikki May, and I've just started because I had a bit of a journey today, so I started an audiobook, and that is Don't Panic, which is written by Neil Gaiman, and it's Douglas Adams and the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, and it's read by Simon Jones. So it's all about Douglas Adams and all about the origins of him creating this franchise. But yeah, those are my current reads. To begin, the first book I've read and finished in April was A Maze of Death by Philip K. Dick. This is the second book I've read from this author now, and I definitely enjoy his writing. He wrote things like Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep and The Man in the High Castle, the most popular ones that people probably know him from as well, because they've had like adaptations and stuff. I think Blade Runner or Maze Runner, whatever it's called, is Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, but I haven't read either of those ones. I've read Valis and now this one, and I gave this one a 4.5 stars. It is classic adult sci-fi. This particular edition is published by Science Fiction Masterworks. I love these covers, they're so cool. It was originally published in 1970. For believability or escapism, I gave it a 4. For characters, I gave it a 3. For world building, I gave it a 4. So basically we are following a team as they kind of go onto this planet called Delmark O. It's otherwise uninhabited, so they're basically trying to see if it's going to be habitable for people to live on in the future. They quickly discover that the bizarre new world is more dangerous and much stranger than they could ever have imagined. The colonists have nothing in common and no idea why they've been sent there. All they know is that there's no way to leave, and one by one they are being killed. So it felt a bit to me like Agatha Christie in space. It was really cool. It had much more depth than I was expecting, especially because it was discussing things like theology. So it was talking a lot about religion and the studying of religion. It's fun to kind of see the different beliefs in here, and how they're all very factual. Their belief in this book has been scientifically proven, so it's all like, I don't know, it's really cool. All of that, like the theology conversations, really added to the world building as well, and also the characters' depth, because you kind of got a greater feel for how they saw the world. Honestly kept me on the edge of my seat throughout. I didn't know what was going to happen next. As I say, the plot unraveled much more than I was expecting. It definitely has some dated and words, especially describing female characters. You can tell that it was from the 70s. It was yeah, not as politically correct as you would say now, but other than that, this was a great story. I thought it was so much fun, really like thought-provoking. I have a couple, or is this one long one? I think I have one long quote that I want to read. I've started to try and put quotes in now, so that might be a thing if I remember. If it's a really promising one, I might tell you guys that. The quote that stuck out to me in this one says, "What we're afraid of," Betty Jo Burm said, "is not that. We have one vast fear, and that is this. There is no purpose to us being here, and we'll never be able to leave. Everyone came here by Noza. That was mandatory. Well, a Noza can land, but it can't take off. Without outside help, we'd never be able to leave here. Maybe this is a prison. We thought of that. Maybe we've all done something, or someone thinks we've done something." She eyed him alertly with her grey, calm eyes. After that, I got through an audiobook. It was also a book that I had through NetGalley, so that cleared off one of my arcs. And that was The End of Men by Christina Sweeney Bard. It was read by a whole host of people. Like, it had I don't know, like 7+ people. It was a full cast, which was really cool. And this one was adult speculative fiction sci-fi, published by Burrow Press in 2021. I gave this one a 5 out of 5 stars. Believability, characters, world building, all 5 out of 5 stars. And this one is really interesting because it was written before COVID happened, but it was basically about a pandemic, but the sickness was targeting those with male genes, so those that are men were being targeted, and it was killing them off. That's what we are following. That's the plot we're following, being deep into this pandemic. It might be triggering for some people. I thought it was phenomenal. It was absolutely fantastic, excellent, even more so because it had the full voice cast, which really amplified all of the different characters. And I feel like it added a deeper believability because everybody had their own their sound. It made the story come to life a little bit better. The science portions didn't get too heavy for your average reader, so I felt like I could comprehend pretty much what all they were saying. And I love that we got to see different countries and different professions perspective on the matter as well. That also made it more believable. It was just super engrossing. Felt complex enough to feel impressive, but not enough to baffle you, make you feel stupid in any way, or take away from the story. So amazing book, absolutely thoroughly enjoyed it. 3 different quotes. Shit life syndrome, doctors speak for. There's actually nothing wrong with you. You're just really sad because your life is really, really hard and there's nothing I can do about that. And then the second quote I wrote down was, what I do know from years of reporting is that ignorance, incompetence and fear so often go hand in hand with government that none of us should be surprised if the institutions we thought would keep us safe would in fact be woefully inadequate in the face of a pandemic. And then the third one was, bad things and good things can coexist, Amaya says with a sad smile, and we have to find the good where we can. Okay, the next book I read was a buddy read, and this was with Deborah from Hills of Books, and we were continuing on with the Daughter of Smoke and Bone series. So this is the second book in the trilogy, Days of Blood and Starlight by Laini Taylor. As I'm talking about this every other month or so, I won't go into too much depth, but I think a lot of people probably know this. It's one of those kind of famous OG YA stories, fantasy romance. This one I gave a 4.5 out of 5 stars. Published by Hodder and Stoughton in 2012. For the believability / escapism, characters and world building, I gave them all 4. So yeah, thoughts for this one without being super spoilery for specific events that happens that you don't want to be spoiled for. I felt like I was much more invested in everything than I had felt in the first book. I thought there was phenomenal world building. We kind of get a rehash of starting again in a way, and that's all I'll say on that matter. As I said, I don't want to spoil you, but I really appreciated that and I think it worked in its favour. I adored the character growth in this one and how it helped to evolve the plot as well. There were so many twists that I wasn't expecting. I was absolutely hooked by everything. There were some really intense, grim torture scenes that I was not expecting, which kind of affected me. I ended up having a dream about teeth, and it wasn't the nicest dream. And there was definitely an annoying overuse in foreshadowing, especially with Karoo. Like, I just felt like you'd get this sentence, it was like, little did she know, da 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 da, if only she'd knew, da 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 da. So you couldn't even just enjoy that moment of, oh, this could potentially be something that it's not stating it to be. You kind of got a little bit too much hand holding, and it was like, I just want to enjoy that. I don't want to think, oh crap, that's not, don't trust the situation because they're telling you now it's not going to be that later. That is really long-winded. I hope you know what I mean. It was just too much foreshadowing, but other than that, very much enjoyed this, and I'm really hoping the next book is on a similar, or the next and last book is on a similar rating, if not a 5 out of 5 star. I really hope. Oh, and for the quotes of this one, I have, they wouldn't die or be taken from her. They would go freely to make their life around another person and leave her behind. And then the next one is, the impression of souls was synthetic. Sound or colour, flashes of images and feeling. Xander's had been Madaway, dappled light and newborn and quiet. Next up, I finished another audio book. This one I didn't have on NetGalley. It was just one that I wanted to read from my library. And that one is Sugartown Queens. This one was read by Barney Turpin and it was written by Marla Nunn. And I gave this one a 4 out of 5 stars. It's YA contemporary. I don't know who the actual publisher is. It said Listening Library, but I think that was just the audiobook version. I'm not too sure. I didn't look up properly who had actually published the written one, but it was released in 2021. For believability / escapism, I gave it a 4 stars. Character wise was 5 stars, and world building I'd say was a 3. I don't think I have really any quotes for this one. I find it difficult to remember to write down my thoughts when it's like audiobook. Also, sorry if you hear a lot of noise in the background. They're doing some sort of festival nearby me. I think it might be an all weekend bank holiday thing. I'm not too sure. I wish I'd known earlier because I kind of want to go, but it's very, very loud, and for that I do apologise. I'm not going to apologise for the sick moves I'm going to be throwing down halfway through this video. Anyway, Sugartown Queens. I'm just getting the synopsis up because I want to give it justice and I don't want to spoil stuff. So it says, when Amandla wakes up on her 15th birthday, she knows it's going to be one of her mother's difficult days. Her mother has had another vision. If Amandla wears a blue sheet, her mother has loosely stitched as a dress and styles her normally braided hair in a halo around her head. Amandla's father will come home. Amandla's mother, Annalisa, always speaks of her father as if he was the prince of a fairy tale, but in truth he's been gone since before Amandla was born, and even Annalisa's memory of him is hazy. In fact, many of Annalisa's memories from before Amandla was born are hazy. It's just one of the many reasons people in Sugartown give Annalisa and Amandla strange looks. That and the fact her mother is white and Amandla is brown. But when Amandla finds a mysterious address in the bottom of her mother's handbag, along with a large amount of cash, she decides it's finally time to get answers about her mother's life. But what she discovers will change the shape and size of her family forever. This had some really strong conversations on racism and colorism within South Africa and within the family that's, you know, supposed to love and care for you, how that dynamic works in there. I loved how our main character showed such an inner strength and self-worth despite being beat down by those who are supposed to love her. She just came up on top every time. Some absolutely solid friendships in this, particularly female friendships, which I really adored seeing, especially like within girlhood. It was wholesome, funny, strong and believable. I really enjoyed seeing that little dynamic there and how they brought others into the group. It just it was amazing. I do feel like personally I took too long to read this, so I felt like it did affect my experience. I was reading it on and off like the half term, so I wasn't working all the time, so I only had to put it on whilst I was working, like, you know, when no one's in the room, pop it in my ear, carry on with my computer work, that sort of stuff. But because I had an amount of days off, I just wasn't picking it up because I didn't need to, and I was busy doing other things because I was on holiday. I think had I have like just busted it out in 2 days or so, it probably would have got a 5 stars, but that's just my fault. I just felt like I had to kind of re-remember where we were in the story each time I picked it up, and it broke the flow. But again, that's just a me thing. After that, I picked up one that I feel like I just shouldn't have, and that was My Brother's Name is Jessica. I'm just going to warn you now, this might be triggering in those in the trans community, so please skip forward if you don't want to hear about this. You've probably heard a lot about it already. This one was read by Joe Jamieson and it's written by John Boyne. He's the author of The Boy in the Striped Pyjamas, which of course is another controversial book because it's like trying to get you to sympathise with the Nazi regime, you know, by using children and things like that, and it's just not accurate as to what would happen. Anyway, I gave this one a 1 star. It's YA contemporary. It's published by Puffin in 2019. The world building I gave it 2 just because it was like the school life and politician life, it felt like life, I guess, but the believability of it and the characters were all a 1 for me, unfortunately. We're basically following a story of a young boy whose older sibling comes out as trans and she wants to be referred to as Jessica. Parents are like in the politician area of work, so they're very public facing and they're like, this can't get out, I don't respect what you're saying, I'm still going to call you by your dead name basically. And the annoying thing is that we're not seeing from Jessica's point of view, and I think that's like part of the crux. Like it's just it's coming from the perspective of, oh, it's so hard being the sibling of this trans person and woe is me, I miss my my brother, like how can my brother be my sister now? Like it's not really nice to read about. So yeah, it just felt incredibly misguided and harmful for anyone that is dealing with that kind of identity crisis. They don't know how they should be feeling, and I think had a young person read this and got that back, I think it would have been detrimental to them personally. Everyone in this was just so toxic. Jessica rarely had anyone fighting for her, and yeah, the climax was still a massive letdown. It didn't center on her. It didn't center on her feeling like, yes, finally they understand my family, I have my family back, they love me. It wasn't even her moment, really. It just felt like, yeah, a cis person complaining about how hard it is for them, which, okay, I understand. Yep, you're basically grieving for the person that you had known. I respect that, I totally understand that, but come on, there's a bigger picture here. How must your sibling be feeling with no one, you know, fighting her corner? I don't know. And again, there was just so much dead naming and misgendering. It was very uncomfortable to read, to be honest. It was not very nice. So yeah, I'm just gonna leave it there. After that, I've read this little one. This is The Islands of Fandae by Ollie Locke, and I gave this one a 2 stars. It's middle grade fantasy, published by Amazon in 2018. Unfortunately, I gave the believability / escapism just a 2 star, and the characters and world building 1 stars. Elsa is literally sitting next to me just so she can steal my pens and play with my like Illuma crate bag. Just no, Elsa, no. On the 21st of January 2006, a 12-year-old girl called Antigone was astonished when she spotted a whale in the River Thames outside her house on Cheyne Walk in London. It's just so descriptive. Later that evening, the little girl travelled to Cornwall to stay with her aunt in a tiny castle overlooking the sea. While exploring the beach, she found a bronze lantern rolling in the waves, which she took back to her bedroom. That night, she was awoken by hundreds of multicoloured lights darting around her room and far off over the sea on the horizon. Mesmerised, the little girl headed out into the night where she found a small boat on the rocks below. She set sail for the lights and embarked on an epic adventure that was to be nothing short of extraordinary. For that night, Antigone crossed over the horizon to a land kept secret from the human world, an archipelago of magical islands beyond your wildest dreams, where unbelievable creatures live and wishes can come true. Antigone had entered the islands of Fandae. That on its own on the back is just so too much. Like, you're just giving away the whole plot, basically. It was a cute concept. I enjoyed the first half better than the second half. I also feel like there was too many things that are quite unsettling for young readers. Some of the monsters in here were like quite like garish and grim, and I'd feel frightened at the age that this is aimed at reading that. I don't know, maybe that's just a me thing. It definitely needed more editing down to make more of a solid tale. It just had all these random bits just packed into this one. Even if they'd made it like focused on less but made it slightly longer, like as a series or a duo, then it wouldn't have felt so like cram-packed with all these ideas that just it didn't have enough time to properly explore. It definitely done that a disservice, I think. But yeah, the second half in particular, there was just too much going on to keep track of, and it just got a bit overwhelming, unfortunately. The second to last book that I read was The Sad Ghost Club by Lizzie Meddins, and I gave this one a 4 out of 5 stars. It's YA contemporary, published by Hodder Children's Books in 2021. For believability and characters, I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars, and for world building, I gave it a 3 out of 5 stars. And this is basically what it says on the tin. It's The Sad Ghost Club, following a character who is, you could probably say, depressed to some extent, and anxious, and just very unsure of their self. And they go to a party where, of course, you know, all those emotions are forefront in their mind because they're going on their own and they don't know if anyone they really know is going to be there, and then they try to put themselves out there, and it's just a big like anxious mess. But they find someone who's looking like they're feeling a similar way, and they decide to, you know, try and make a friendship with them, and it's very sweet. It was super wholesome. It was the perfect read for anyone, I feel, that's, you know, currently feeling alone, not understood in their feelings, maybe not understanding their own feelings, and just confused, like, why do I feel like this? Because it really focuses on like depression on many little things, like, I don't even know why I'm depressed, like, why am I feeling this way? I'm okay generally, it's just all these little life stresses that are just building up and up, and it's such a common thing, I think, that a lot of people probably feel but don't know how to articulate, and I feel like this just does it easily for you. I think it would really resonate with a teenage crowd as well, especially talking about like exam stress and being overwhelmed at the uncertainty of the future, going to parties, that sort of thing. I think that would really pique their interest and kind of sympathise in that way. But even for me, I very much enjoyed this one. I've got the sequel as well. For the quote for this one I have, and in 10 years I'll look back and be like, huh, that really wasn't a big deal. Just because it feels huge now doesn't mean it will forever. And then the last book that I read for April was The Women of Troy by Pat Barker, and I read this with my cousin Ebony. This was also a book that I had through NetGalley as well, so it's ticked off another e-arc. This one is a like mythology retelling published by Penguin in 2021. The believability and escapism, unfortunately, I gave a 1 star. The characters and the world building, I gave it 2 stars. Overall, I gave it a 2.5 stars. So half a star less than the Silence of the Girls. And it's just continuing the story of Briseis, who's the main kind of perspective, I guess you would say, that we're reading from the fall of Troy onwards. And again, I was just disappointed at the male focus. The whole thing is marketed as a feminist retelling to the Trojan War, giving a voice to women and girls that are otherwise erased out of history. You only hear from the male hero's perspective, or have been villainized in some way, and it just didn't do that. And it's like, why market it as something that it's not, you know? I actually feel like I would have enjoyed it more had that not been heavily the case. Like, if I went in not thinking, oh, you know, we're going to be hearing about the women and what they went through in these like slave camps, basically. They're being taken from their lives, watching their husbands and sons and brothers killed, and then they're taken to be like concubines and sex slaves, basically. It's awful. I wanted to hear more of that, and if that hadn't have been the case where they were saying this is what we're focusing on, I would have enjoyed it more, as I say. The conversations with each other, like the characters, they just felt jilted, they didn't flow, and generally it was just dull, and I didn't care for the narrative. So I don't think I'll be picking up any more Pat Barker, especially when it's marketed as, you know, hearing the women's side of things, because even when we were hearing from a women's perspective, it was all male focused, which is just frustrating. I do have a couple quotes though. Perhaps as a young man he might have loved her, and perhaps somewhere underneath the face paint, the cynicism and the plotting, he still did. The next one is, I was too young to understand that elation is one of the many faces of grief. There's nothing sophisticated or civilized about it. Like savages, we ingest our dead. And then the last quote that I liked was, and so from one damaged and mutilated individual, 2 whole creatures grow. Those are all the books that I read in April. I feel like we have a bit of a mix, a hit or miss bag, but that keeps things interesting, doesn't it? We can't all love everything, and that's okay. So let me know if you guys have read any of these books that I've spoken about today, what you read in April, what your favourite book was. Oh, my favourite book was The End of Man, I think. I keep saying man, it's men. The End of Men, I think, was my favourite. And yeah, I shall speak to you in another video soon. Bye!